men and women's buttons are on different sides. If you ever noticed that men's shirt buttons are one way and women's are another, you're not alone. And no, it's not a fashion accident. This design goes back hundreds of years, long before modern clothing or mass production. To understand it, we have to go back to Europe, when buttons first became common in clothing. Before buttons, clothes were tied, pinned, or wrapped. Buttons were expensive, handmade, and a sign of wealth, so only the upper class wore button garments at first. And here's where the split begins. Men's buttons were built for self-dressing. Historically, men dressed themselves. Men's clothing was designed for practicality. Military uniforms, riding clothes, and workwear. Most men were right-handed, so placing the buttons on the right side of the garment made it easier to fasten with a dominant hand. That convention stuck. Men's shirts, coats, and jackets all have buttons on the right side ever since. Women's buttons were designed for servants. Women's clothing followed a very different path. Upper-class women in Europe were not expected to dress themselves. Wealthy women were assisted by maids or lady attendees, who stood facing them while fastening gowns, corsets. From the maid's perspective, placing the buttons on the left side of the wearer made the task easier. Again, because most people were right-handed. So women's garments were designed for the person helping, not the person wearing them. That's why women's buttons ended up on the left side. Why didn't it change? You might expect this to disappear once servants became rare. But by the time women began dressing themselves regularly, especially in the late 19th and 20th century, clothing manufacturers had already standardized this practice. Factories didn't change because people were used to it. Clothing templates had already been established. That's how women's clothes are made. Became a tradition. Even when the original reason vanished, the design stayed. There are a number of other theories out there to explain this, but the servant explanation is the one supported by fashion historians and clothing records. What started as a class distinction quietly turned into a gender norm, ones we still wear today without thinking about it. Like, comment, and sub for more interesting stories. The gross history of the spittoon. Did you know we once had spit buckets, like for people to spit into, placed everywhere? Grocery stores, hotels, bars, lawyers' offices. Back then, they were called spittoons. And for a long time, that spit bucket was one of the most important pieces of furniture in America. Let's rewind to the early 1800s. Back then, chewing tobacco wasn't just popular, it was everywhere. Men chewed constantly. Farmers, politicians, factory workers. Smoking was expensive back then, and pipes weren't always practical. But chewing tobacco, cheap, portable, and powerful. There was just one problem. You couldn't swallow it. Chewing tobacco produced a thick, dark saliva loaded with nicotine, and swallowing it could make you violently sick. So people had to spit constantly on floors, sidewalks, walls, wherever they were standing. Public places became disgusting. Enter the spittoon. The earliest spittoons were simple. Wooden or ceramic bowls placed in taverns, courtrooms, hotels, and train stations. They evolved into heavy brass or cast iron containers designed not to tip over or splash. The spittoons became so common that etiquette manuals actually taught people how to spit correctly. You were supposed to aim carefully, avoid noise, and never miss, because missing was considered rude. Even the U.S. government embraced this. Congress installed spittoons throughout the Capitol building. Judges' benches had them. Classrooms had them. And it wasn't just tobacco. In an era before modern medicine, people believed spitting expelled illness from the body. People spat to fight disease and to avoid what they thought was swallowing poison. But the spittoon reign wouldn't last. By the late 1800s, medical science caught up, and doctors realized something horrifying. Spittoons weren't preventing diseases, they were spreading it. Tuberculosis, influenza, and pneumonia thrived in spit containers. Cities began outlawing public spitting altogether. Anti-spitting campaigns appeared in posters, calling it unclean and dangerous. In fact, there are still laws out there that make spitting illegal. Many states classify it as a misdemeanor, with specific regulations in places like Virginia, which bans spitting in public buildings, transportation, and on sidewalks. Then came the final blow to the dip. Cigarettes became fashionable. Chewing tobacco declined, public health laws tightened, and the once essential spit bucket quietly disappeared. Today, spittoons survived only as antiques, a reminder of a time when spitting indoors was not only acceptable, it was expected. So next time you see one in an old movie or a museum, remember, that wasn't decoration, that was the public health, 19th century style. Like, comment, and sub for more interesting stories. The origin of the bikini. Believe it or not, but the bikini wasn't just made to look good. It was named after a nuclear bomb test site. Yeah, this tiny piece of clothing has some explosive history. The idea of a two-piece outfit isn't modern at all. Ancient Roman mosaics, like the famous bikini girls, show women exercising in what looked like sports bras and briefs. But those weren't swimsuits. They were athletic gear. The modern bikini wouldn't appear for another 1,500 years. Fast forward to 1946. Paris. Europe was still recovering from World War II, and fashion was getting slightly bolder. French engineer Louis Réard designed the smallest swimsuit that the world has ever seen. So small, it could fit into a matchbox. He wanted a name for it that would blow people's minds. And just days before his launch, the United States government had tested the atomic bomb on Bikini Atoll, a tiny island in the Pacific. So Réard called his swimsuit Le Bikini, saying it would have the same explosive impact as the nuclear bombs. Pretty dark marketing, But it worked. When Weird showed off the bikini at a Paris pool, no professional model would wear it. It was considered scandalous. So he hired a 19-year-old nude dancer, Michelin Bernardini, to model it. The press went wild. The Vatican condemned it. It was banned in places like Spain, Italy, and even some U.S. beaches. But soldiers and sailors and most men loved it, and so did the media. Soon Hollywood stars like Marilyn Monroe helped turn the bikini from forbidden to fashionable. Huge side note and a bit of a rabbit hole that I yet again found myself in. This whole story got me thinking, well, I've always been a fan of SpongeBob. Didn't he live in a place called Bikini Bottom? Why? Well, a quick Google search revealed that Bikini Bottom is named after the real-life Bikini Atoll, that same island that was mentioned earlier, a site of U.S. nuclear testing. With the name a play on words combining the location with the bottom, part of the bikini swimsuit. The underwater setting and unusual, mutated looking like sea creatures in the show are a humorous reference to the effects of nuclear tests on the environment and marine life. So in other words, Patrick, Squidward, Mr. Krabs, and even SpongeBob himself were basically the genetically altered aftermath of a nuclear testing site. I swear, there's no faster way to ruin childhood than by doing these kinds of stories. So yeah, next time you see a bikini, remember, it's not just a swimsuit, it's a post-war symbol of rebellion, freedom, and controversy, named after a nuclear testing site in the Pacific Ocean. Like, comment, and sub for more interesting stories. The middle finger. You've probably used it, seen it, or been on the receiving end of it. Yeah, we use it today as an insult or act of defiance, but have you ever wondered why the middle one? And why is it insulting? Let's break down how the world's most famous rude gesture came to be. The story starts in ancient Greece. To the Greeks, the middle finger represented a phallic shape, the finger being the male organ, and the curled fingers on the bottom, on the other side of the finger, symbolizing, well, the rest of the package. So yeah, when someone flipped you off in ancient Greece, they weren't saying forget you. They were mocking your manhood, or either telling you to go and do something with that finger. The Romans picked it up next. They even had a word for it, digitus impudicus, meaning the shameless finger, or the nasty finger. It was used in plays, graffiti, and even politics to show contempt or disrespect. The medieval myth about the English archers. Now, you've probably heard the story that the middle finger started during the 100-Year War, when English archers supposedly raised that middle finger to taunt the French. Since archery is mainly used with the index finger and the middle finger, they were showing to their battlefield adversaries that they could still pluck their bows. Cool story, but historians agree that it's a myth. There is zero record of it from the 1300s, and yeah, it sounds great, but the gesture was already around centuries before that. Certainly never dying off from history, the middle finger made its return to the 19th century America. One of the earliest photos of it ever taken was in 1886, when a baseball player named Old Hoss Radburn was photographed flipping off the camera during a team photo. From there, it kind of spread through the American pop culture, comedy, and eventually becoming a household gesture that even your grandmother can recognize. So next time someone flips the bird, remember, the middle finger isn't just offensive. It's ancient history. Like, comment, and sub for more interesting stories. We all know it. Red means stop. But have you ever wondered why red? Why not blue or purple? It turns out this goes way back, long before cars even existed. In the 1800s, railroads used colored lights to signal trains. Red means stop, white meant go, and green meant caution. There was one big problem. While lights were too easy to confuse with stars or lanterns in the distance, railway companies swapped meanings. Green became go, and red remained a stop. The system we almost universally follow today. Fast forwarding to today's stoplights, also having yellow lights symbolizing caution. But there's a scientific reason too. Red light has the longest wavelength of any visible color. That means it travels further through air, fog, and rain than any other color. So even in bad weather, it's the easiest color to see from a distance. That made it perfect for warnings and danger signs, not just in railways, but eventually for traffic lights, brake lights, and stop signs. By the 1920s, red was officially locked in as universal color for stop, a mix of tradition, physics, and psychology. Because red doesn't just travel further, it also grabs your attention and triggers alertness in your brain. So next time you hit a red light, remember, it's not just random. It's 200 years of science, safety, and a little bit of human instinct all shining right back at you. Like, comment, and sub for more interesting stories. What if I told you Uncle Sam was a real person? You know Uncle Sam, the tall guy, white beard, top hat, pointing and saying, "I want you for the U.S. Army." During the War of 1812, the government hired a meat packer named Samuel Wilson from Troy, New York. His job? To supply salted beef to the American troops. Every barrel and some pieces of meat were actually stamped with the letters U.S., short for, you guessed it, United States. But the soldiers who knew Wilson personally and called him Uncle Sam started joking that those letters stood for Uncle Sam himself. Pretty soon, Uncle Sam became the Army's nickname for the U.S. government. After the war, the nickname stuck, spreading into newspapers and then political cartoons. By World War I, artist James Montgomery gave him his now very famous look. The stern eyes, the white beard, top hat, red and white blue suit. That 1917 recruitment poster turned Uncle Sam into a national icon, the personification of the entire U.S. government. In 1961, Congress officially recognized Samuel Wilson as the original Uncle Sam. So next time you see that famous face, remember, he wasn't born in a propaganda office. He was born in a butcher shop in upstate New York. A real man who helped to feed the army and accidentally became the face of the nation. Like, comment, and sub for more interesting stories. So, Jingle Bells is a song. In the recent history, there have been numerous claims that the song itself is tied to a very dark past. Let's take a look. In 1857, a man named James Pierpont wrote a song called One Horse Open Sleigh. No Christmas, no Santa, no snowmen. Pierpont was living in Medford, Massachusetts, a town at the time known for sleigh races. Fast, chaotic competitions where young men showed off by racing horses through snowy streets, while bells rang loudly to clear the way. So here's where it gets messy. The song wasn't about slavery or anything overtly hateful, but Ordway Hall, the first time it was ever sung, was literally in a minstrel theater. Those minstrel shows back then were the Super Bowl of black people mocked, enslaved people romanticized, all for laughs. Pierpont wrote multiple songs for that exact crowd. Poor Elsie, Kitty Crow, performances where the use of the N-word was thrown around quite a bit. Some of the debated lyrics of Jingle Bells are the laughing all the way part. Some say a likely reference to a comedic routine known as the Laughing Darky. A pretty big claim, but okay. Another one is the bells and the bobtails ring are claimed to be the bells known to be forcibly put on enslaved people so they couldn't run away without making a ton of noise. Whether or not any of these claims are actually true is largely left up to the listener. While the song definitely had nothing to do with Christmas and everything to do with old-fashioned horse races, the person behind the song has a somewhat questionable past, to say the least, and it doesn't help his situation with Jingle Bells in particular. Pierpont himself was a son of an abolitionist, but he ditched the North, moved south, and even joined the Confederacy as a clerk songwriter for the Army, which doesn't help the optics. Bottom line, the debut of the song was definitely in a entertaining fashion, and that's fact. Whether or not that makes the song itself forever is where people fight about it. Kind of like we still sing stuff from Complicated Histories. Bring Around the Rosie? Did a story on that one too, actually. Check it out. Pierpont's legacy is tied to minstrel shows, whether he meant for it to be or not. And when schools start singing Dashing Through the Snow around kids, that history doesn't vanish just because we're having cocoa. So when did this become a modern Christmas staple? As things evolved and time did what time does, things changed. Meanings to words changed. The association today with Christmas and Jingle Bells is so strong that it's almost impossible to picture the song being written about anything else other than jolly times. If you look up the original lyrics from the 1850s, you'll see how the song is very much mainly about sleigh racing, picking up girls and having a good time. So what do you think? Any validity to the lyrics being racy, or are we just reading too much into it? Like, comment, and sub for more interesting stories. Ever heard of the phrase, let the cat out of the bag? The origin date of this story is largely argued online. Okay, so back in the 1600s, or the Middle Ages, markets are wild, like open-air bazaars packed with hagglers yelling about turnips and corn. You're a farmer, need a suckling piglet for dinner. The tradition back then was that sellers would wrap him up in burlap sacks before making the final exchange. But here's the scam. Cats were cheap, pigs weren't. Still aren't. But if you were able to somehow fool somebody into buying a pig and then slipping a cat into the bag, you've just made quite the profit. Let the cat out of the bag becomes slang for spilling fraud, spilling the beans. That's another one, actually. He let the cat out of the bag, like he told everybody that, we're committing fraud. It spreads fast. By the 1700s, it's a full-on proverb. Don't buy the unseen, because life is full of sneaky surprises. The other explanation to this phrase, and a far less likely theory, suggests that the phrase referred to the cat-o'-nine-tails whip, which was supposedly kept in a bag on naval ships. And when it came down to punish a sailor, the cat would be let out of the bag, or the whip would be taken out, which also kind of blew my mind, because I had no idea such punishments were ever handed out in the Navy. Then, of course, I got curious and did a little bit more research on this and found out that this practice was a brutal reality for the naval life until it was officially abolished in the U.S. Navy and on U.S. merchant ships by an act of Congress on September 28, 1850. Man, we had some really interesting ways of punishing each other back in the day. Like, comment, and sub for more interesting stories. Think fortune cookies came from China? Nope. The truth is way more surprising, and it starts with San Francisco tea gardens, a world war, and a battle for credit. The fortune cookie wasn't born in China at all. Its earliest ancestors came from Japan, known as Sujuria Senbei, a crisp cracker with a hidden fortune inside. In the late 18 and 1900s, Japanese immigrants brought these cookies to California. In San Francisco and Los Angeles, Japanese bakeries like Benkyodo Company and Fugetsudo made them by hand, serving them in tea gardens, long before Chinese restaurants existed in big numbers. Then, Japanese Americans were sent to internment camps, and their businesses were shut down. When they had returned, they found that Chinese restaurants had adopted and popularized the cookie, serving it after meals. And it just kind of stuck. And of course, here's where the politics come in. Makoto Higawara of Golden Gate Park's Japanese Tea Garden in San Francisco is reported to have been the first person in the U.S. to have served the modern version of the cookie in the tea gardens of the early 1900s. And then, David Jung, founder of the Hong Kong Noodle Company in LA, made competing claims that he invented the cookie in 1918. San Francisco's Court of Historical Review attempted to settle the dispute in 1983. During this proceeding, a fortune cookie introduces it with a message inside that read, "San Francisco judge who rules for LA, not very smart cookie." A federal judge of the Court of Historical Review from San Francisco determined that the cookie originated with Hagiwara, and the court ruled in favor of San Francisco, their own city. Kind of unsurprising. I mean, I would vote for my own city too, and subsequently, the city of Los Angeles condemned the decision, which definitely doesn't sound fair. At the very least, the deciding city should have been a neutral, non-biased one, meaning literally any other city other than LA or San Fran. So the Chinese fortune cookie, it's really a Japanese-American-born invention. A crispy reminder that culture travels in mysterious ways. Like, comment, and sub for more interesting stories. The surprising origin of the background laugh track. Imagine you're filming a brand new comedy show in front of a live studio audience. But no one's laughing. The jokes fall flat and the air feels awkward. And you've got an entire network expecting a hit. So what do? You fake the laughter. That familiar chorus of giggles and crackles we've all heard in classic sitcoms was invented to make TV funnier than it actually is. It all started in the 1940s, when television was replacing radio as the main source of home entertainment. But something was missing: the warmth and energy of a live audience. Early comedies felt sterile, so producers began adding recorded sounds of laughter to make the shows feel more alive. Then came one man that kind of changed everything: Charles Charlie Douglas, a sound engineer who worked for CBS. In the early 1950s, he invented something called the laugh box, a mysterious machine filled with reels of pre-recorded laughs, giggles, chuckles, and snorts. Using levers and buttons, Douglas could sweeten any joke with the preferred laugh at the perfect time. The laugh box became one of the Hollywood's best-kept secrets. Only Douglas and a few others knew how it worked. For decades, nearly every sitcom, from Brady Bunch to Seinfeld, used some versions of the canned laughter. Well, why did it work? Because humans are social creatures. When we hear others laugh, even if it's fake, we're more likely to find something also funny. Psychologists call it social contagion. Laughter spreads. But as TV evolved, audiences got smarter. By the 2000s, shows like The Office and Parks and Recreation ditched the laugh track entirely, relying on awkward silence and subtle humor instead. Still, the laugh track remains nostalgic, a reminder of TV's earlier years, when one man with a secret machine taught America when to laugh. Like, comment, and sub for more interesting stories.